everyone, and welcome back to Empire Soccer Report. I believe this is already episode 17. The ball just keeps trugging along here in 2026. Red Bull New York. Another game, another confusing one, I should say. 2-0 loss to FC Cincinnati. But the big one's coming up. Wednesday midweek, they host New York City FC in the round of 16 in the US Open Cup. I'm James Burley, and I'm joined by a very special guest, Zach Feldman of RBNY Season and the Unfiltered Podcast. Zach, I was just on your show a couple weeks ago. I had to return the favor. Happy to have you here on Empire Soccer Report. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. As you said, it's been a busy week. I actually think you've caught up to me in episodes now because I've been splitting them up into two-parters over the last couple of weeks with all the action. It's been busy though. It's been a fun time and more fun times ahead. Obviously not with the results, but hopefully some improvement on Wednesday night and in the future Saturday night against Dallas as well. We've got a big two-match homestand coming up, so I'm hoping that this team can improve because it's been a rough three-game winless run and it's not been the most fun. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to talking to you as well, as always.
Yeah, three frustrating ones in a row. Obviously a flat 4-1 loss to CF Montreal a couple weekends ago. Then they followed it up with a 4-4 thriller against DC United where they dropped points. Definitively can say they dropped points. And then went in with a rotated lineup against FC Cincinnati over the weekend. Kevin Denke's 2 goals late in the first half. One's a penalty. One, defending leaves a lot to be asked for, but a rotated squad in that game. And it's the first time really, including that 3-1 win over the Pittsburgh Riverhounds in the round of 32 of the Open Cup, because we'll be talking about Open Cup today. It's the first time that Michael Bradley has kind of shaken things up with the lineup. Of course, Tim Parker, someone that a lot of the media has been asking, are we going to see more of Tim Parker? Fan favorite, been with the club before. He gets a start. Next to Dylan Nealers, Joyou Masankabungi gets his first ever start for the club. Gustav Berggren plays as an 8 for the first time, seemingly since last season. And it looked like it was going to be Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting starting at the striker position, but a late withdrawal from the lineup. Mo Sofo gets in there as well. Your take on Michael Bradley changing things up, what we ultimately got out of the lineup. Of course, Julian Hall slotted back in for Choupo, who supposedly sick and unable to perform. And it ended up being a 2-0 loss. I guess they're prioritizing this midweek match against their rivals from across the river. A 2-0 loss, changes to the 11. 3-match run that's without any wins. So what's your takeaway? First thoughts from that one, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, there had to be a point this season where we rotated the lineup and changed things up a bit. I just think that that's kind of the wrong moment to do it when you're going into a very tough place to play in Cincinnati. Yes, they've not had a season up to their expectations, at least in recent years, but still, it's a tough game. As we know, they have plenty of talented attackers. Kevin Denke, as you mentioned, very good striker, very talented striker with the 2 goals. Joey Masankabungi to throw him into the deep end with his first MLS start, especially after the second half that he had against DC, where we kind of fell apart defensively. Just, for me, not the right moment to give him his first MLS start, and obviously it proved pretty detrimental on the night. He gives up the penalty late in the first half, has that moment against Pablo Buca where he just kind of lets him run by and doesn't really do much to stop him, and then that leads up to the first goal. So, I think Tim Parker getting a start was something that we've been wanting to see for a while, especially given how Robert Villadair has been playing. And he was good on the night. I think him and Dylan Nealers had a solid partnership, so I don't have any issues with that. Again, Mohamed Sofo on the wing, I don't really have issues with him starting. My only issue personally is that when George Ruvalcaba is coming off of a high in midweek, 2 goals, his best performance of the season. I said it at the time and I'll say it again. I don't think you should be dropping him after a performance like that. I think you've got to keep the momentum going. I think dropping him to the bench for this game is going to ultimately halt what was a very good run of form and a very good moment for him. So again, I think that rotation is fair to expect with a really busy schedule, and I understand prioritizing the Open Cup, but I think I would have done it in a slightly different way than what we saw from Michael Bradley on Saturday night.
I like that you brought up Ruva because I actually thought he didn't need to come out of the game against DC United, especially since he's not even going to be used from the start on the weekend. He scored 2 fantastic solo goals in that second half, just, 15 minutes apart from one another. And then he ends up coming off. And I thought the Red Bulls ended that game last Wednesday a little bit toothless in the attack, whereas DC United nearly won it in the last minutes, if not for a foul in the penalty area. So interesting for him not to finish out the game against DC and then be an option off the bench against Cincinnati. So I agree with you there. A little bit backwards thinking for me. Sofo, I think, has earned, spot starts here and there. Had a very good 2025, as we recall. And it would have been nice to have gotten Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting as well from the start, because considering how good of a 2025 he had, and he's played second fiddle to Julian Hall here, he's not seeing the lineup ahead of that kid, and this would have been a good opportunity for that to happen. Unfortunately, the illness gets in the way. And obviously the biggest name of the team starting on the bench, Emil Forsberg. I don't have any issues with that, primarily because if this is the first opportunity for him not to go 90 minutes, not to play as much as he has been, I guess you got to take it because he's been overworked, certainly. Not that it's been showing in any of his performances, but I do think stylistically he's being asked to do more running back and forth, just pitching in defensively, certainly more tasking the role that he's playing now as opposed to the one he's played each of the last two seasons. So okay to see him get a chance to rest. It's the second game in a row for Audrey Mehmeti picking up a yellow card, interestingly enough. And I think the biggest takeaway has been the performance of Masanka Bungi, who, for me, didn't look up to the task against DC United in the 45 minutes he showed. I thought maybe not fully fit. He came to New York from Leipzig on this very weird loan that only goes through May. Perhaps he picked up an injury, not fully fit. That's what I thought initially. And that still could be the case here. He only went 45. For me, he was the worst player on the day. I don't mean to pile things on to someone who is admittedly still a teenager. He's a 19-year-old fullback. But I think it's a little bit worrying that Matty Dos Santos, at his young age, is very clearly ahead of the pack at the left back position. Omar Valencia feels intentional that he's not the player that they turn to in relief for Matty Dos Santos. He actually played for the Twos over the weekend in their 4-1 victory, over the Columbus Crew reserves. Also playing with them and having to assist Dennis Yangor on the right wing position. Perhaps we'll see him get a chance to come back to the first team. Andy Rojas was the man of the match in that performance. So worth noting who is getting time for the Twos and who is getting integrated into the first team. There's been some theories about Joyo Masankabungi's arrival in New York being dictated by folks outside of the scope here in Whippany and Harrison. Perhaps that was a decision picked by the higher-ups with Red Bull, with Leipzig wanting to get him a chance to get on the field somewhere. Because right now, for me, not sure I see the fit. Again, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist and throw anything out there that, he was definitely forced upon Michael Bradley to play him. I don't know if I believe that at all, but what I do think is that he is a little bit below the level that they've needed from him. What have you seen from his first 90 minutes now? Not just the 45 against Cincy and DC United. Two halves he's played in each of those games. Not the best. Your thoughts on Joyu and what we can expect from him in the next month that he'll be with this team?
Yeah, look, as you've already mentioned, he is young and he's inexperienced. He's barely played any senior football at all up until this point. So it's fair to expect that there will be a little bit of a transitional period, a little bit of a rough patch for him. With that being said, looking just at the numbers, we have conceded, I think, 5 goals in the 90 minutes that he's played and 1 in the other 2 halves that he hasn't in those 2 games, right? So again, it's not exclusively on him. We can't pin the blame on him, but with that being said, right? I don't think he has been up to par, as you've mentioned. I think that Omar Valencia probably deserves more of a fair shot in that left back position than he's gotten, even over a Matty Dos Santos, right? I think that Valencia, with what he showed last season before the injury, with the 5 assists, with the performance levels that he was putting up, there needs to be, I think, a little bit more of an opportunity given to a guy like that, rather than just sticking him with the twos and having him play those games. Because I don't think at this point in his career where he needs to be developing more, that's going to really do much to improve his level and improve his performance. So I think that at this point, I don't think that Bungai should really be seeing much more of the field, to be honest with you. He's only got a month left on his loan, so it's really, like you said, I think the move itself was probably facilitated by Leipzig. Not to say that Michael Bradley was going to be unprofessional and not play him, but I also think we have better options in that position at the moment. And I think what we've seen so far against both DC United and FC Cincinnati, as I'm going to talk about tomorrow on my show, I also kind of highlighted him as a main talking point, is it's just not up to the level or the standard that we want to set defensively. And I think that Matty Dos Santos is probably the starter for the foreseeable future, but I also think his deputy at this moment in time shouldn't be Bungai. It should be Valencia, or even something that I've been wanting to see for a while, and I think something that we talked about too is in the press box is playing Jamar at left back and then moving Justin Che or Dylan Nealis to right back. I think that is also a viable option that we've only really seen very limited of in the Red Bulls games this season, but I think at some point that should be something that we see because Dos Santos is going to need reprieve eventually. Bungai's not going to be here for much longer, and Valencia does not seem to be in the plans. So again, at the original point, I just don't think that we should be seeing much more of Bungai this season, to be honest with you.
Well, a few things there. We have talked about the idea of Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy. Has played on both sides of the back line in his career as a right back, as a left back. He's naturally right-footed. And perhaps Michael Bradley going with tradition, you want to have a left-footed left back, you want to have a right-footed right back. That could be the decision maker there to keep Marshall Ruddy on the right. He's been very good. I think for my money has been one of the better, at least in a back four, one of the better right backs New York has seen perhaps since like 2021 Kyle Duncan. So you have to give a lot of credit here to Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy for how solid he's been, and you don't want to mess up a good thing. I can understand that. But with that said, I think Juan Mina has also been, a bit of a nice surprise in relief coming in at the right back position. I haven't had many complaints, if any, with his performances. Whereas I think Valencia, even in the cameos he's had this season, still feels like he's working to get back to that form he had at the beginning of 2025. It's been almost now a full calendar year for him, where he's been a little bit iced out from the first team, right? He lost that job with the injury last year, never quite came back to that role. Raheem Edwards played a lot of left back towards the end of last year. And now it's been Matty Dos Santos' job to lose. And quite frankly, no one seems equipped to take it from him. For me, it still feels like Dos Santos, as promising as he looks as a young player, maybe a little bit too green to be fully accepted as the starting left back. But right now, I think there's a big gap with anybody behind him that's a natural left back. Now, I could be wrong, and Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy could get a run at left back. Maybe Juan Mina starts on the right, Dylan Nealis, perhaps. But we'll see. Obviously, the defense has been taking a lot of the discussion lately around this club, and rightfully so. I mean, how many goals now? That's 25 conceded on the year, I believe. That is not a good recipe for being a winning team. They're -9 goal difference. They've dropped all the way to 11th in the table. Scored 16, conceded 25. That is the second worst in the Eastern Conference at the moment, ahead of only Orlando, who have been, quite frankly, a dumpster fire. So things have got to change in that realm. And one of the sources of that change potentially could be Julian Bazan, who, like Omar Valencia, like Dennis Yengor, featuring for the second team over the weekend and actually scored his first goal in his debut. So we'd like to see him be able to prevent the goals as well, but scoring a goal could be an added bonus from the center back position. It'll be interesting to see at what point he does get integrated into the first team. Could take a while, and the Red Bulls could be conceding more goals moving forward. But I think it's important to recognize a bit of rotation in this one. Forsberg didn't come in until the second half. And I think maybe I know you said not the right time to do this. I agree, but absolutely the right choice to prioritize this match coming up against New York City. It's against your rival. It's in a winnable tournament where you are now 3 wins away from hoisting a trophy. Absolutely 4 wins away from hosting a trophy, excuse me. They absolutely need to prioritize this game. And if you look at the way City played over the weekend, pretty strong 11 from them. So they've often been at a disadvantage in the Open Cup because of like stadium hosting priorities. Yankee Stadium doesn't usually get a lot of love from U.S. soccer or from CONCACAF. They've been at a disadvantage in those sorts of tournaments for this reason. They played, I think, 10 out of 11 starters. You could make a case. Hannes Wolf is out injured, and he won't be available on Wednesday either. So maybe you could make the case that they played their 11 best that were available. But for me, I think we'll see some significant turnover in their 11, and we'll get into that more deeply. What I think the starting 11 could look like. Maybe they'll play on tired legs and give it their best. Who knows? But as we know, the Red Bulls also have a very good record in this competition and in knockout competitions in general against their bitter rivals from across the river. Lastly, what I want to talk about from the Cincinnati game is, not the best performance from Ethan Horvath, but he finished above expected goals on this one, and that hasn't been the case because you concede 4 goals, you're not going to be above your expected goals, and there has been discussion that he's not quite up to the standard that was left behind by guys like Carlos Coronel and Luis Robles before him. And you could go further and further back. This club has had a blessing of good goalkeepers in the past. I think Horvath has been maybe a little bit unfairly maligned by some of the fans at this point of the season. I think there's been more good than bad from him. Yes, the first game against Montreal, not very good. The second game against Montreal, another mistaken possession. But overall, have been pretty pleased with what he's been able to provide shot stopping wise. And I think that he's going to continue to get more comfortable here and is more than serviceable. And for my money, an above average MLS starting goalkeeper. I'm curious what your thoughts on Ethan Horvath's performance was over the weekend against DC and just in general, now that we've gotten a decent body of work from him in between the sticks for the Red Bulls.
Yeah, for me, I don't think he's been bad. I just think he really has not been helped by the defense in front of him. That's my main takeaway. I think that he has had a lot of moments this season where he has saved us from more defeats and more results not going in our way. And he has put in not man of the match performances, but certainly game-saving performances with some of the saves that he's made. And yes, he has made some pretty terrible mistakes, specifically in the 2 games against Montreal. But for my money, I think that he has been a net positive in net for Red Bull New York. He's not, I don't think, been as good as Carlos Coronel was, but we have to remember, Carlos Coronel was not perfect either. He's certainly made his fair share of mistakes. And, we have conceded 25 goals this season, which is not good. And, part of the reason why we're so low in the table, because keep in mind, there are a lot of teams on the same amount of points as us, including New York City FC, who are all the way up in 7th. They just have a superior goal difference. So again, I think that Ethan Horvath has not necessarily been perfect, not at all. He has made some bad mistakes once again, but I think that he's better than what we could have had this season, which is, like a John McCarthy in goal who isn't awful again, but probably not as good of an option, or even an Aiden Stokes. So I think that I'm a little bit more comfortable with him in net right now, and I think that he will continue to grow, as you said, into this position. So for me, again, overall net positive for sure.
And just looking at the table, you mentioned so many teams level on points, 5 different teams on 12 points, all with an identical 3 wins, 3 draws, 4 losses. And they're only, at the moment, it's a little doom and gloom. Like, it's been a pretty negative energy so far, us just talking about the team lately. Only 4 points off the top 4. It's still very, very early. MLS, the season really doesn't start until we get into the summer, and then you start to see some separation in the table. The hope is that you find your footing and are able to address some of those issues by the time the summer window closes. Not that I expect the Red Bulls to be, dishing in and out with players at the conclusion of the World Cup and for things to start up again, but I do believe that we'll get a clear idea of what this team looks like week to week. Consistency has been a little bit of a factor. Haven't seen super consistent performances back to back. They've consistently been conceding goals at a higher rate than they should most recently. That's not great. But I think we expected that with the way that they looked in preseason and with just the makeup of the squad. And then most significantly with this style of play. I think it's now because they are a little bit lacking in the center back position, a little bit thin in central midfield. I think it's starting to look a little bit clearer why they're conceding these goals. They play with such an aggressive high line. If they don't have the recovery speed, if they don't have the experience in the back to be able, the physicality to deal with some of those transition moments, they're going to concede goals, especially when, they play a team like DC and Ty Baribo's their striker. He gets chances. He's going to score them. He doesn't need much space. He doesn't need many looks. Kevin Denke is the same way. They caught a break sometimes against some teams that didn't have their shooting boots in front of them. I think back to the New England game where they were beat in transition a number of times. They stuck out a 1-0 win in that one. And that was still in the honeymoon phase where they opened up the season with two wins and the thought was, well, if they can keep this going, if the defense, bends and doesn't break. And then Justin Shea did go down with an injury. And he's been seriously missed because he is the athletic piece in the back line who's able to recover, who's able to get stuck in with his face to goal in his rush back. So I've been pleased with him when he's healthy. They need him to come back quick. He's had injury issues in his career before as well. So that's why they seriously need to find a way to get Bazan ready with the first team sooner rather than letting him develop with the second team. But if that is the path that he needs to take, that's the path he needs to take. So we'll see just how they go about correcting those issues in defense. But that just got us caught up to speed pretty much with Cincinnati. With that match, you mentioned John McCarthy. I imagine he'll be the starting goalkeeper against New York City FC. It's a cup match. You go with your cup keeper. And this one on Wednesday at 7 p.m., not 7:30 at Sports Illustrated Stadium. In knockout competitions, the Red Bulls are 5-0 against NYCFC, looking to make that 6 and a chance to advance to the quarterfinal of the U.S. Open Cup for the second year running. It's an exciting one. It's always exciting when these two teams play, but it's at home for Red Bulls, and it is in a cup competition where they've owned their rivals. The City team, I think, is better than their record suggests. They're also going through a rough patch at the moment. They just actually drew 4-4 midweek on the same day the Red Bulls drew 4-4 to Cincinnati. Then they lost on the weekend to CF Montreal, who seems to have the secret sauce to beating the New York teams. No other way to explain that with their squad. But City in a bit of a rough patch. I think they're better than their record suggests. The Red Bulls, I would argue the same thing. So not a lot to pick apart between these two teams. We can get into what the squad rotation could look like for Pascal Jensen and his men, and maybe if Michael Bradley wants to go back to a full strength 11. What's your initial thoughts about the Red Bulls facing NYCFC in this cup game on Wednesday?
Yeah, I think that, to be honest with you, judging by what Pascal Janssen has said, I don't think we're really going to see much rotation from City, even after the game on Saturday night. They actually started he's 23, but a pretty unknown quantity in this league, Arnau Farnos on the left wing, in the absence of who was out on their left wing for them? Hannes Wolf.
Hannes Wolf.
Yeah, Hannes Wolf. So again, right, I think that was the one change that they made to the lineup. They really have not rotated much this season. Even against Westchester, they really didn't change the lineup all that much in that 5-2 win. Maybe we see like a Tyus Magno start, who is scoring goals after coming back. So, he hasn't been given probably a fair shot in the 11, but maybe we see him start. Maybe we see Agustín Ojeda, who is another dangerous attacker. But for me, from what I can see from New York City FC, again, like you said, I don't think that their record necessarily reflects the level of this team. I think it's a very good high-level team, as we are. Both teams like to keep the ball, as we saw against Miami. So it'll be a very possession-based game, I can imagine. Neither team will look to hit the other on the break, which may play in the Red Bulls' favor, considering we've had a lot of trouble against teams who don't like to keep the ball. So again, I think that we could see an interesting match, probably a high-scoring match as well, considering both teams struggled to keep the ball out of the net. So I'm intrigued to see what we see on Wednesday night.
It's so funny you mention that now the approaches between these two teams are so ball dominant. That has never been the case in this rivalry before, ever. There has never been, maybe even in the very earliest iteration of the Jesse Marsch era, 2015, did the Red Bulls outpossess this NYCFC team. Ever since then, I can't remember a game where that was ever a focal point of the way Red Bull New York wanted to play. And now it's going to be about who can control the game in the middle of the field. And that was never what it was. It was always about second balls. It was always about chaos, hitting on the counter, set pieces. That has been what defines this rivalry for such a long time. And now it's going to be toe-to-toe in the middle of the park. I cannot wait for this one because of that. Like, it's going to be a very different New York derby, very different Hudson River derby for what we've been accustomed to between these two teams. And I think that, I think that edge to it is going to give the Red Bulls something extra to play for. Not that they need any more motivation. Cup game at home against your biggest rival. Yes, bigger rival than DC United. I know history, but let's be real. I do think that the players will be up for this game no matter what. For the young guys like Adri Mehmeti, Julian Hall, Matty Dos Santos, this is their first chance, really being a part of the rivalry from at least the start of the match. In Julian Hall's case, at the first team. So there's a lot to be pumped up about if you're on Red Bull New York. But I could say the same thing for the guys on the other side, right? Not a great last few games for them. They did beat Westchester pretty handily in the round of 32, but since then, they're in the same boat. Two losses and a draw. They haven't won in the league going back to March 14th against Colorado Rapids. So they're really looking to get back into good graces into the win column, and they could see this as a opportunity to get the momentum back into their sails. Let's take a look at what I think the starting lineup will be for the Red Bulls. I imagine it will be John McCarthy in goal, as it's a cup game. I think Shaquille Marshall-Ruddy will be at the right back position. I think we'll see Dylan Nealis and Robert Volader in the center of defense. Matty Dos Santos will return to his starting spot at the left back position. Adri Mehmeti, Ronnie Doncourt, and Emo Forsberg will be the midfield trio. And I do think Rafael Mosquera will get the trust again to come back into the 11 on the right wing, George Ruvalcaba off the left, and Julian Hall as the number 9. Back to basics. This is the lineup we've been expecting, with a couple changes there. Volader in for the injured Che, and Mosquera in for Cowell, who still, is finding his form. Wouldn't be surprised if Cowell starts, of course. Your thoughts on that 11? Do you think there'll be anything different? And how do you think they'll be able to, play in a different type of New York derby where, two teams are going to really be jostling for possession the entire 90 minutes?
Yeah, well, first of all, you're absolutely right on the fact that they will 100% be jostling for possession. It'll be a very interesting watch, not something that we've ever seen, like you said, in a Hudson River Derby. So from that front, I'll be really interested to see. But what I like about this lineup, just the lineup this season, is the amount of homegrown players that we have here. We have 3 guys in this lineup who will absolutely be wanting to give everything for this game because they grew up supporting this club and they grew up loving this club, right? So at the end of the day, what we saw last season when the team lost 5-1 and what we've seen in the past couple of years where the team has not been up to par against New York City FC, even at home, has been the players just not having the same intensity as NYCFC. I don't think that'll be an issue this year because of the guys that we have on the field. Emil Forsberg, obviously, enough has been said about his leadership ability and how he can galvanize the group. We saw it in the playoffs in 2024, so I have no issues there. I do agree with you. I think John McCarthy is going to start. When I put out my projected lineup, I probably should have had that, but I kind of neglected to remember that it is a cup game and not a league game. So yeah, I think you're right on that. It's probably a toss-up between Mosquera, Cowell, or even Mohamed Sofo on the wings and George Ruvalcaba. So it'll be interesting to see what we go with there. But yeah, overall, I think it's a strong lineup, and it should be one that can deliver a performance with at least the passion that we need in the Hudson River Derby, which we have sorely been lacking over the last year or so, where we've been just, hounded by New York City FC in terms of, fight and passion and just wanting the game more. I think it's fair to say.
Well, within the league, not including the playoffs, not including cup competitions, NYCFC have made the city blue in the last couple seasons. Not something that Red Bulls fans will like to hear, but that is the truth. And I do think that while passion plays a big part in these games, I think the quality between the two teams over the last 2 years, especially in 2025, was significant. City were, especially the way they ended last year, very, very strong. I think that they've returned most of those players into this team. The big exception, Alonso Martinez, is not there, and as well as Justin Hack. I think those are probably the two significant changes. But Nico Fernandez Mercado has 8 goals. He's been spectacular playing out of position. I think he's, primed himself for a move to a bigger club in Europe. sooner rather than later. Agustino Heda started to come into his own. Hannes Wolf not being available for this match, I think, is going to be something of an obstacle. But there are a number of reasons to believe that this is going to be a uh, a strong performance from the visitors. They know better than anybody the record in knockout competitions between these two teams. That's another bulletin board thing for NYCFC to want to get up for this game. And even if in years past they haven't always prioritized the U.S. Open Cup to the level of other MLS sides, I think they're very aware of the fact that only 16 MLS teams are actually in it this time around as well. So this is the most attainable trophy for every MLS team that's still alive in this tournament. DC United, obviously, not in it anymore. One Knoxville, the only third division team left. A couple of second division teams still remain. But this is going to be a fun one. And Tavon Gray, who was shown a second yellow against CF Montreal over the weekend, he'll be available for this Open Cup game, will miss the next MLS match. So I expect him to be in the starting lineup and potentially could be wearing the captain's armband as he has done a couple times for his homegrown club. So the lineup for the visitors could see some changes, but because Pascal Jensen, like you said, wants to prioritize this competition, Tomas Romero will likely be in goal for Matt Freese as it's a cup competition. I think Tavon Gray will be on the right because he's going to miss the next MLS match they have. Thiago Martins in the center defense. You can take your pick between Kai Trewin and Raul Gustavo, who hasn't always looked super strong, has bounced between center back and left back. So he could be an option. Trewin, the Australian international, also an option to play in central midfield. We'll see how Jensen approaches that. I've got him down as the starting center back. Kevin O'Toole, former Red Bull New York Academy product at left back. Maxi Morales is going to be in the 10. Keaton Parks, could be coming off the bench on this one, but he loves the New York Derby. He didn't see the full 90 minutes. I think he'll start. Aiden O'Neill did see the full 90 minutes, but he's a warrior. He'll start. And then the front three, it could be Arnal Farnos on the opposite side of Agustino Heda. Nico Fernandez-Mercal will probably start in the striker position, but it could be Talis Magno. Andres Perea could be an option in central midfield, and they could move things around with getting one of their midfielders onto the wing. I think Talis Magno is going to start. He was great in the Westchester FC game. Yes, different level, of course, against a League One team, but he has some history against the Red Bulls. I think he'll get the start on the left wing. What do you make of this NYCFC lineup? Do you think they'll be on tired legs? Do you think that, going with a strong lineup will give them that extra jolt they need to finally break the curse against their bitter rivals in these knockout competitions?
Yeah, I think first of all in the lineup, I think you're pretty spot on there. I think there'll be probably mixed rotation a little bit. I think Pascal Jensen probably could have benefited from a little bit more changes to the lineup against Montreal. There'll probably be some fatigue on both sides, to be fair, because I think the Red Bulls also had a partial rotation, not a full one. So some guys will certainly be on tired legs for us, but for New York City FC, I think they'll feel the effects more so, especially in that game against Montreal where they really battled for the full 90 minutes. There was only one goal in it. It was a close, tight game, so they probably put some more effort into it than they would have liked. And then on the side of things where I do think, yeah, New York City FC will 100% be up for this game. I think that, like you said, their record has not been good in this fixture in the past, and especially in knockout competitions, right? We still lead the all-time series in general as well. So that'll, again, bulletin board material, as you mentioned, right? They'll want to get that first win desperately. But with that being said, it is in Harrison. It's in front of our fans. So our players, will have every reason to be up for it as well. I think it'll be a high intensity, high octane game. I think it'll be probably high scoring as well, as I mentioned earlier. I have said this once before. I'll say it again. I'm really looking forward to this game. I think it'll be both the most entertaining Hudson River Derby that we've seen in recent years, and also the most just intriguing Hudson River Derby that we have seen in a while. I think it'll be more evenly matched than games we've seen in the past as well. New York City FC last year, they made the Eastern Conference Final. We missed the playoffs. They were in a much better state than we were. I don't think that's the case this year. I think both teams have a lot of positives going for them in 2026 so far. Even if we're outside of the playoff line, we're tied on points. So I think we're, as far as the matchup goes, very, very evenly matched here.
And just a bit of personal news because it's a little bit relevant here. Mentioned Tavon Gray a few times, got the red card. He could be available. I was lucky enough last night to be in Paterson, New Jersey at Hinchliffe Stadium commentating the New York Cosmos, actually the reserve team in the UPSL, playing against Pennsylvania Prime FC. The Cosmos ended up winning that game. Early substitute in that game was Kayvon Gray, twin brother of Tavon, who actually ended up getting the game-winning assist in that match. This is my first time being to Hinchliffe Stadium since they've renovated it a couple years ago. I know that is where the Cosmos first team plays. If you have not been, it's one of the most historic venues in the New York area, one of four still standing former Negro Leagues baseball stadiums that are still in the U.S., part of the National Park complex of the Great Falls in Paterson. Beautiful scenery, beautiful park. And the Cosmos are back and hopefully here to stay. So if you have the chance to go check out a New York Cosmos match, whether it be with the reserves or the first team, definitely do it. Hinchliffe Stadium rules. That area of Paterson is awesome, and you should absolutely go. Not just because Tavon Gray's twin brother plays for the reserve team, but that was a little segue into what I was doing this weekend, and some cool things that are going. Soccer isn't just limited to MLS or NWSL in this area. There's a lot of great lower league stuff that you can check out. The Cosmos doesn't get more historic than that in terms of American soccer. So yeah, Hinchliffe Stadium, a beauty. And also a game that you should definitely go to if you don't already have tickets or aren't already planning to go. This Hudson River Derby on Wednesday, going to be a great one. Going to be a more intimate crowd than normal between these two teams because it's midweek, because it's Open Cup scheduled on short notice. Not expecting a huge crowd, but expecting a lot of local diehards from either side to head out to this one. So it's going to be really fun. Going to be very hostile. Going to be very chippy on the pitch. Everything you want in a derby match. And then there's another reason why you should go to the next Red Bulls match on Saturday against FC Dallas. I know not the, most exciting matchup on paper in terms of rivalry, but they're honoring a legend. Bradley Wright Phillips getting the induction into Legends Row after the match. There will be an on-field presentation, and then he will be inducted into the very exclusive Legends Row. He'll only be the second player following the induction of Luis Robles a few years back. And commemorative pins will be given to the first 10,000 fans in attendance. So if you want to get there early and grab a pin, I'm going to try to find one if I can, even though they don't always give that to media. Michael Batista, shout out to him, always does a great job of getting the match day pins. So maybe I have to do some of that. Let's talk a little bit about this FC Dallas game. We're not going to go into lineups or anything like that because there's another game in the way. But for the league, a chance to get back into some momentum, some consistency. FC Dallas are about the same in terms of quality and standing in the table. They did take the Red Bulls to task in preseason, if you'll recall. So what do you expect from this endeavor on Saturday? Of course, the Legends Row for Bradley Wright Phillips, wholly deserved. His number 99 will never be worn again, and now he'll rightfully go into Legends Row. What do you expect on Saturday?
Yeah, as you said, there'll be a game in the way, so not necessarily that we can 100% come to a full conclusion about what this game could look like in terms of the lineups and stuff like that. But what I can tell from FC Dallas is they're inconsistent, but they are a dangerous team, especially on the break. We saw it in preseason. They really they took the Red Bulls to town with their counterattacking play. We're going to see something similar on Saturday night. I would expect they play in a five-back, wing-back, so they are a transition team. Watch out for guys like Petar Musa, Logan Farrington, two very prolific strikers. The Red Bulls this season have had trouble keeping out guys like that who know how to find the back of the net. So that will be a challenge in and of itself. They have, some creative players as well. They signed Santi Moreno recently, who could be a danger. He hasn't really hit his stride yet, but nonetheless, I think that'll be something to watch out for. Joaquin Valdiente, another talented player in that team. So they will be a danger on Saturday night in terms of those transition moments that the Red Bulls have really struggled with this season. I haven't looked too much into depth in their recent results and their recent form, but even still, I think taking that out of the equation, you can expect a tricky matchup, especially with tired legs as well. For Red Bull New York, I think this season that I don't think they have won the Saturday after a Wednesday game yet. So, something to look out
Mhm.
for sure for this Red Bulls team is playing on those tired legs. They have not been able to, you know, string together results with a midweek game in the way. So we'll see if they can break that this week, especially with two home games as well.
And they've got another midweek game coming up on the 13th against May the 13th against the Columbus Crew ahead of the first New York Derby of the MLS season. So important to note that because where they're in the tight congestion of the schedule now, trying to squeeze games in before the World Cup. There'll be a little bit of this after the World Cup as well, into late August and September. There's going to be some midweek games that they're going to have to deal with, and this is just part of the modern era of soccer, football around the world, especially in MLS, especially with a World Cup coming to interrupt the season. So this is something they're going to have to sort out. The lack of depth, you could argue, a bit of a reason why they've not been able to deal with these moments. You could also the dogmatic approach of Michael Bradley consistently going with the young guys, the players, and the system that he wants to play. That could be, contributing to some of those difficulties on the quick turnarounds. But yeah, they've got a very, very big one against NYCFC in front of them. Then they've got another big one honoring a club legend, chance to get back into good graces, good form in the league against FC Dallas on Saturday, both at home. And they have, let games slip in the last few tries at home. They did get that win over FC Cincinnati, but sandwiched that with a couple of ugly ones as well. So a chance to get back into some good form, a chance to advance in a cup competition, chance to get one over your rivals. A lot of big chances this week for Red Bull New York. I just want to highlight some of the other Open Cup ties because there's a lot of fun ones. One, Knoxville SC, third division team who knocked off DC United. They've got the Columbus Crew. Louisville City have got Houston Dynamo, as well as Colorado Springs Switchbacks playing the Derby of Colorado against the Rapids. So hoping to see some USL teams, USL Championship and USL League One, continue to march their way through this competition. I have a feeling, though, because all three of those teams are actually away from home, that they'll be at a big, big disadvantage here. The Crew will probably be a little bit less likely to be surprised by Knoxville because of the way DC United approached that game and ended up losing. So ultimately, a lot to look forward to in the Open Cup. It's the 111th edition of the tournament, my favorite competition by far within this sport in this country. So let's get into some score predictions before we say goodbye. Zach, Red Bulls, NYCFC, who are you taking? What's the score and why?
Yeah, I think that it'll be, as I said before, high scoring, high intensity, high octane. Both of these teams are having problems keeping the ball out of the net. NYCFC without Matt Freese, Red Bull New York without Ethan Horvath, most likely. That's another added factor for being able to keep the ball out of the net. It'll be a little bit more challenging, I think, for both of these sides defensively, especially with the rotations in goal. So I think that it will be, again, high scoring, but I think the Red Bulls will just about edge it because for New York City FC this season, it's been about fine margins. They just have not been able to, get the win in tight games. I think this will be another tight game that ultimately, because of the home field advantage and because of the Red Bulls' success that may be playing on the minds a little bit of the New York City FC players in terms of the head-to-head, I think that it can play in their favor, but it can also be a disadvantage for NYCFC, and I think it will be, at the end of the day, a tight 3-2 Red Bulls win. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well, because I think personally it'll be a really interesting game.
Yeah, I think some of the recency of this rivalry is going to play a factor. This NYCFC team, not a lot of turnover from the last season. Very different case for this Red Bulls team. There's going to be a lot of guys first New York Derby. It's going to be a lot of guys first New York Derby with the first team, first New York Derby playing from the start. All of that is going to factor into this. NYCFC has known what it takes to beat the Red Bulls, at least in league play this last couple of years. Now you could make a case that, they haven't gotten the job done in knockout competitions, and that's certainly true. The numbers back that up, but this is a different Red Bulls team. It's a different approach. NYCFC, like the Red Bulls, have struggled when playing against teams that don't like to use the ball as much as them. Now it's going to be a bit of a car crash where in the past, the Red Bulls would, throw caution to the wind, fight for second balls, fight to play on the counter. It's not going to look like that. NYCFC might be a little bit more in their element playing against the Red Bulls. The Red Bulls might be a little bit more in their element playing against NYCFC. So for that reason, I'm going to go with the experience of City in this one. I know, sorry, but I do think NYCFC are going to win 3-2, just like they did at the end of last regular season. They put the final nail into the coffin against the Red Bulls 2025 season. And as they look to get back into the playoffs, that's something that they're going to have to be able to do, is get one over on their rivals. That is a big part of being a good football team. That's a big part of getting the fans to rally around you again. Expecting a great crowd, not a full stadium, but a great crowd, and a very exciting match on the pitch either way. And then we'll take a look at what went right, what went wrong before we even think about giving predictions of this FC Dallas game coming up. Before we go, real quick, want to shout out Ron. I don't know your last name, but you said hi to me at Red Bull Sports Illustrated Stadium last Wednesday for the game against DC United, and you said you liked the show. I really appreciate that. And you also mentioned maybe try to get episodes earlier in the week. Well, we did it. We're recording this on Monday night for you, buddy. Hopefully, we get this edited out on Tuesday, so it's before the game, and you have all week to watch it in the lead up to the game and lead up to the FC Dallas game. Shout out to Bradley Wright Phillips, club legend. He'll be honored into Legends Row and inducted rightfully after the match against FC Dallas. And that pretty much brings us up to speed. Zach Feldman, thank you for coming on the show. Do a great job with the Unfiltered podcast. You do a fantastic job with RBNY Season on Instagram. Let folks know where they can find that stuff. And definitely be sure to check it out if you're listening or watching, because Zach does great coverage and is a must follow and a must listen throughout the season. So Zach, tell folks where they can find you.
Yeah, so with RBNY Season, quite simply, as you said, over on Instagram, it is at RBNY Season, at RBNYSCN. You can follow me over on X. I am not really posting on my RBNY Season X account, but I am covering the team a little bit by the handle at _ZJF_, which is my technically personal account, but I also do some press stuff on there. The Unfiltered podcast as well. You can find that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. It's Unfiltered, just the red is in all caps. There's a lot of shows out there called Unfiltered, so it might take you a second to find it. If you can't find it on that first search, just type in by RBNY Season, because I had that little tagline. So if you have trouble finding it, let me know. But yeah, as James said, give it a listen. We always appreciate the support. I'm hoping to bring video content to that show at some point, but I have trouble with video editing, so it might take a little while. But yeah, that's all I got to say. That's where you can find me. So thanks for having me on, man.
Of course, always a pleasure to have you on, Zach. Definitely check out his stuff. Does great work covering this team. And yeah, Hudson River Derby, then Legends Row for Bradley Wright Phillips. Big week for the Red Bulls. Also opened up the big training facility in Morristown last week and are slowly making the transition from East Hanover / Whippany, I know it's right on the border, to Morristown. So yeah, thanks again to Zach Feldman for jumping on. He says 3-2 Red Bulls over NYCFC. I say 3-2 NYCFC over the Red Bulls, and they finally break the curse in the knockout competitions. But that's going to do it for episode 17 of Empire Soccer Report. Want to thank Zach Feldman again for jumping on. I've been James Burley. Thank you so much for listening, for watching, and we'll catch you next. Take care.